Hey everybody, my name is Steven and welcome back to the Storytime channel. Without wasting any time, let's get into our stories of the day. Couldn't join a club that would have you. Some years ago, I was finally out of debt and ready to start investing for my future, but I didn't have a clue how. That's when I heard about a national organization that promoted investment clubs, offering support and tools to help people like me learn about investing by doing it. I liked the idea. Get smarter, play low stakes, and maybe have a beer or two while you do it. So I told a few friends, they talked to their friends, and pretty soon we had a budding investment club. Since we were all friends of friends, organizing went smoothly. We elected officers and adopted a simple charter based on the national group's templates. Minimum monthly dues were set at $10, an amount any one of us could afford to throw away. But any member could contribute more than the minimum if they liked, and to build up our investing pot, most of us did. Individual contributions bought shares in the club's holdings like a stock in a corporation. Higher contributions meant more shares, meant more voting power when we made club decisions. As we got rolling, a few more people heard about the club and expressed interest, so we created a little process. Attend 3 meetings as the guest of the member, and then, if you're still interested, club members decide whether to offer an invitation. We always did. Sign the charter, pay the month's dues, and you're in. Most new members paid extra for at least a while to catch up to the voting power of the founding members. So everyone stood on more or less equal footing. By year 2, we had settled into a friendly routine, holding monthly meetings that were one part socializing, one part learning, and one part considering what to do with our growing little pot of cash. We picked a few stocks, started buying a few shares at a time, and portfolio performance was added to the monthly treasurer's report. We cheered each modest gain and learned from our small losses. Then came Pat. Pat was an outlier in our friend group. Most of us knew her, but few knew her well. She had a reputation for being a little too loud, a little too blunt, a little too cocky, a little too rude, but she was also known to be smart. In a club focused on learning, more smart couldn't hurt, right? Besides, our well-respected president had brought her in. And right away, Pat proved she was smart. She had reviewed our charter and our past minutes before she came to her first meeting. She asked solid questions about past decisions and our reasoning. She listened respectfully to the education and stock study presentations, probing politely, and made mostly appreciative comments after each meeting. Just a bit of smart butt thrown in once in a while, but we could handle a bit. After her third meeting, we sent her to the next room while we discussed inviting her to join us. There were a few misgivings expressed. We had all heard stories about Pat's capacity for unpleasantness after all, but President said, I warned her pretty bluntly that she needs to behave when she's here. We're all friends, but this is business. Money is serious. So I told her, keep yourself in check. Leave your attitude outside. Ultimately, everyone agreed she had indeed behaved. We had no reason to doubt her sincere interest. So we called Pat back in and President said, congratulations, Pat. Just pay your dues and sign here. With a flourish, Pat handed Treasurer a $10 bill and everyone applauded as she signed the charter. Then she said, thank you all, thank you. But frankly, you really don't have any way to keep me out. The room got quieter. Then she turned to Treasurer and said, now, next month if I'm interpreting your little reports correctly, all I have to do is give you X amount of money and I'll have equal voting rights. Is that right? That's about right, yes, came the answer. And if I were to give you that plus, and here she pointed at the bottom line of the club's total holdings, 4-figure amount, I'd become the new majority shareholder, right? I suppose. And then I'd be in charge of all club decisions, declared Pat. That's right, unless you all can keep ponying up more cash than I can, there's nothing you can do to stop me from running this club like my own private account with nearly double my money to play with, is there? And now that I've signed your silly charter, you don't even have any way to kick me out. So, see you all next month. She smirked, turned, and left. The door had just barely closed when the room exploded. She was joking, right? Aw, heck no. The nerve, could she really do that? This can't be real. How big a mistake did we just make? Wow, what a Class A witch. But as we looked over our template-based charter, we found she was right. There were requirements for tax reporting, officer fiscal responsibilities, bank and brokerage relationships, conflicts of interest, and a host of other issues we'd never faced and never expected to face. There was boilerplate language about how to buy out a voluntarily withdrawing member. There was a provision allowing us to involuntarily withdraw someone who didn't keep up with dues and/or attendance. But we had no cap on individual member contributions and no provision allowing us to kick out a stakeholder so long as they continued to pay their dues and attend meetings. And we now realize that if she could make good on her threat to buy majority holding, Pat could simply outvote any attempt to amend our charter. A more elegant solution probably existed, but within 20 minutes, someone came up with a new clear option. 2 minutes later, we agreed to launch it. We accepted assignments, then went our separate ways to prepare for next month's meeting. That evening, everyone arrived a bit more promptly and settled a lot more quietly than usual. Pat looked smug as she took a seat, seeming not to care that no one spoke to her. She was ostentatiously fanning herself with a personal check. Too bad we never saw it, so we'll never know if she was really ready to put her money where her loudmouth had been. President took the floor. Before I call the meeting to order, I have a personal announcement to make. I made a really poor recommendation to all of you last month. I feel the bad judgment I showed means I'm not fit to be your president. I'm presenting my letter of resignation and my voluntary withdrawal from the club. And solemnly gave the letter to secretary. Pat looked like she'd just been slapped, but she said nothing. Treasurer spoke up. Just so all of you know, President spoke to me earlier about this decision, so I've already calculated withdrawal payout and have it ready according to the terms of our charter. And President took the check. Vice President spoke next. President, you weren't alone in that decision. I voted with you and I also regret my poor judgment. Here is my letter of resignation and withdrawal. Treasurer said, and here is your withdrawal payout prepared as we discussed. And on it went. In small clusters at first, then all in a rush. Each club member declared that they made a terrible decision, presented a letter, and collected an already prepared check. Sometime during the rush, Pat stopped being silent. Okay, I see. Yeah, I get it. Seriously, you've made your point. That's enough now. You don't have to keep up this act. Knock it off already, you freakers! But we didn't. With all the letters collected, Secretary added them to the back of a fat binder containing copies of all the club's minutes and gave the binder to Pat. Your next club secretary will need this. Treasurer was right behind with a similar binder of financial records, a $10 bill on top. Here are all your club's accounting records and remaining assets. President added the signed charter to the stack. So, Pat, looks like you're now a club of one. You win. Good luck and goodbye. We all stood and stared silently until she shoved the stack to the floor and saw herself sputtering to the door. Within 10 minutes, we had signed our newly upgraded charter, re-elected our officers, torn up all our payout checks, and put our new club back to business as usual. Okay, maybe just a bit more giggly and a little more pleased with ourselves than usual. Never saw Pat again? Didn't care. So if you were in this situation, and Pat declared that they were going to basically buy the charter and assume majority ownership, what would you have done? Let me know in the comment section down below. New coworker doesn't want help. Okay. Hello all, back again with more chaos. I guess it doesn't surprise anyone now that I worked in healthcare, so let's get on to another healthcare job post. Note, this story is old. I've not worked at this place for years. Also, this is not the same job as my post about helping my coworkers. Story time. I worked in a pharmacy dedicated to sending medications to nursing homes. Since this is often difficult to do just by hand, there were machines that could help out. I often helped use the machines to package the meds. A new coworker joined my team. She was pleasant enough, but for some reason I could not tell you, even to this day, I hated her on sight. Apparently the feeling was mutual, though we were able to do work together cordially enough. Since the machines, while super useful, were also prone to breaking down, A lot of manual intervention was required to ensure smooth operation. Since it's a pharmacy, we also had to keep track of the medications being used on it, which means counts, often done nightly, particularly with more expensive medications. This information is relevant. I had been at this job for a few years, so was reasonably experienced with the use and maintenance of the machines. Coworker wasn't. This is also where I point out that Coworker is older than me. So, Coworker had been at the job a few weeks and had received some training. So my boss at the time, I've written a post about that creature elsewhere, told me that it'd be okay for her to shadow with me while I worked, but also to make sure she did some of the work on her own so she'd learn via hands-on experience. This also meant I couldn't leave until Coworker did, since she hadn't been given the go-ahead to be alone with the machine. Goody! It went more or less okay for the majority of the shift. I let Coworker do some of the work, as ordered by my supervisor, and she seemed to be getting it. However, for some reason, she wasn't relying on the computer, which had kept track of all the medications used, and their corresponding slots, to do the nightly count. Instead, she was literally writing down every single slot and medication by hand to count later. Coworker, I said, you know the computer keeps track of that. I know it does, YarnAndMetal, but I don't seem to get how to do it. This is toward the end of my shift. My nerves were fried from having to deal with her and I was tired. You do it like this, Coworker. Shows her. I don't get it, YarnAndMetal, so I'm just going to do it by hand. You younger people don't seem to have a problem with computers, but I do. Let me do it by myself. People. The process to see what had been used was literally 2 clicks of a mouse button. I had shown her once at the start of our shift. Our supervisor had shown her during initial training. Another coworker had shown her while she was training. I was done. So I let her do exactly what she wanted. Let her write down every canister by hand, every med by hand, and let her count by hand. I even offered, as a good of show faith, to help with the counting, but again, no OP, I'll do it. Let me do it by myself. Fine. As a result, we ended up leaving an hour after our shifts were supposed to end. That's an hour of overtime that we hadn't been authorized to take, for the record. Next day, my supervisor asks me why I stayed so late last night, so I told her very honestly that Coworker didn't want my help finishing out the necessary counts last night. Supervisor, being what she was, yes, my wording there is deliberate, immediately went and ripped Coworker a new one. The day after, Coworker didn't come in. We all found out she'd quit, effective immediately. Good riddance, I guess. Bonus aftermath. I also found out the day after I had to stay so late that the counts Coworker did, they were wrong. All of them. I choose to believe that they are not incapable of figuring out how to do stuff with computers. I choose to believe that they willfully will not accept that this is how they have to do things. They don't want to learn it, that's what I think. When it's kids, it's not malicious compliance, it's a teaching moment. When you are stuck in a house with a couple of 3- and 4-year-old girls, you soon get to see that it's not malicious compliance, it's a teaching moment, or at least that's my excuse. Now don't get me wrong, I love how independent and creative my kids are, but they are way too bossy. So today's teaching lesson was, when you want to argue that the salt and pepper grinders are actually sprinkle dispensers and demand those sprinkles on your ice cream, who am I to deprive my child of a valuable learning moment? Disclaimer, yes, both children are fine. There was barely any put on the ice cream, but just enough to taste. They were offered new ice creams but decided to eat them completely while staring me down instead and ask for more. The teen years are gonna be fun. Not. Judging by the ending of that story, I think OP's gonna have their hands pretty full in the future. But with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today, so what I want to know is which of these stories that I've read for you today are your personal favorite and why? Let me know which one in the comments down below. And thank you all so very much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.